My name is Teresa Amabile, and I'm a professor at Harvard Business School. I've been studying creativity and motivation for over 40 years now. When I first started looking at creativity and reading the creativity literature back in the 1970s when I was in grad school at Stanford, I discovered that most psychologists who are doing research in creativity took the genius view of creativity. And that is that creativity is something that is a quality of the person, and it exists in only a tiny percentage of the population, that maybe that 0.1% of people that we would call geniuses. And the rest of us don't have it. And we're not going to get it because you kind of have to be born with it. I do believe that that people who are well known for the work that they've done in science, in the arts, in music, in literature, in any field, I do believe that those people certainly exhibited a very high degree of creativity. But that doesn't mean that ordinary people who are never going to be famous can't be creative as well. It doesn't mean that children can't be creative. I took the contrary view at that time that that ordinary people can be creative as well. And I wanted to look at what it is besides someone's skills, besides someone's talent, that might contribute to their ability to be creative. I'd been doing a lot of reading in autobiographies and letters and journals of well-known creative people to try to get some insight into how creativity happens. And I discovered something very interesting. Even people who are extremely well known for their creative accomplishments usually go through fluctuations in their degree of creativity in their lives. Some people quite famously have very dry periods where they have creativity blocks and can't get past them. But even people who don't have those long dry periods do experience fluctuations. Let me give you an example. In his autobiography, Albert Einstein talks about the fact that even though he loved science from the time he was a little kid, he lost his taste for science when he was an adolescent because of the school experiences that he had with science during that time. He was in kind of a strict militaristic school, and he really hated having to sit there in lecture and copy down whatever the lecturer was putting on the blackboard, and then memorize it for the exams and regurgitate it by rote memorization. He said that this coercion was so distasteful to him, and he used the word coercion, that he lost all interest in scientific problems for an entire year. Now, this is somebody who from the age of 5 loved science. His father had brought home a compass when he was a little boy, and he looked at it and was absolutely fascinated. What is this? How does this work? What makes it move? Fortunately, his loss of interest in science didn't last longer than a year. But if that person who was so passionate about science could have his interest undermined by the school environment he was in, by something about that social environment, how much more might the rest of us be impacted? Ordinary kids in school. So that's what I decided to study. And I discovered through a series of experiments that I did in my early years of working on creativity that the social environment, factors in the social environment, can have a significant impact on creativity by impacting motivation. So let me give you an example. I found that if you ask children to make paper collages with a standard set of materials, and you tell some of them that they're going to be competing for prizes, that you or some other adults are going to be evaluating those collages on how good they are and awarding prizes to the very best ones, those kids are going to produce collages that are less creative than the ones produced by kids who have the same materials and who know about the same prizes but think those prizes are just going to be raffled off. They don't have a thought of competition in their minds. No competition, no rewards, no evaluation expected. Those kids are going to produce more creative work. That was my very first experiment on creativity. And I went on to do a series of other experiments with adults as well as with kids, showing that creativity can be undermined by a number of factors that undermine intrinsic motivation. And intrinsic motivation is the motivation to do something because you're interested in it, you're curious about it, you find it satisfying, maybe you find it enjoyable, maybe you find it personally challenging. And some of those factors are working for expected evaluation, where you think you're going to get some critique of what you're doing, being watched while you're working and doing something, working for promised reward. If you do this, I will give you this reward. Feeling like you're competing with other people in what you're doing, feeling constrained in some way in the materials that you can use or how you can go about doing something. And I found in one experiment with adults that simply thinking about what we call these extrinsic motivators or these extrinsic constraints, even thinking about them, having them foremost in your mind, can lead you, at least temporarily, to be less creative in what you're doing. After I had done these experiments, I came up with what I call the intrinsic motivation principle of creativity. And that is that people will be most creative when they're motivated primarily by the interest, enjoyment, satisfaction, and challenge of the work itself, and not by external motivators or external pressures. I went on to study this in the real world, outside the laboratory, by looking at people who were trying to be creative for a living. These were mostly research and development scientists working in companies to develop the company's next generation of new products. These were people who were doing the most innovative work inside their companies. My collaborators and I talked 238 professionals working inside 7 different companies. We talked them into giving us daily reports on their work experience while they were working on these innovation projects. And we did this in the form of emailing them a short daily diary form at the end of each workday. We asked them to fill it out during the entire course of the project that they were working on. For most people, that was 4.5 months that they were getting these little surveys Monday through Friday. For some people, it was up to 8 or 9 months. We got a wonderful response rate. I think they found it kind of interesting to keep these little daily diaries. And we made 2 big discoveries in this study. We discovered, first of all, what we call the inner work-life principle, the inner work-life effect. Now, inner work-life is your psychological experience day by day as you're engaging in your work. It includes your motivation, certainly intrinsic motivation, as well as extrinsic motivation. It includes your perceptions of what's going on around you and what it means, and it includes your emotions, positive, negative emotions, intense or mild emotions. We found that people are most creative on those days and those weeks and those months when they have the most positive inner work-life experiences. And that is, they're most creative when they're feeling the strongest level of intrinsic motivation toward their work, when they're having the most positive perceptions of their organization and their team, their managers, even themselves, and when they're having the most pleasant, positive emotions, feeling happy or proud maybe. We found that not only is creativity higher on those good inner work-life days, but we also found that people are more productive on those days, and they demonstrate a higher level of commitment to their work. And they're also better colleagues to each other, which raises everybody's level of creativity. The second discovery we made came about when we asked the question, okay, if positive inner work-life experiences are so supportive of creativity, what is it that leads to those positive experiences? And we read people's daily diary reports of just one event that occurred that day. And that's all we asked them. Tell us about one event that occurred today that stood out in your mind. Tell us what happened, who was involved. We found that of all the events that occurred on people's very best inner work-life days, the single most important was simply making progress in meaningful work. Meaningful work is just work where you feel you're doing something that matters. You're doing something that contributes to something that you care about. If that's the kind of work that you're doing, even making a small step forward, what we call a small win, can lead to extremely positive inner work life on that day. Very strong positive emotions, positive perceptions of what's going on around you, of the people you're working with, and really strong intrinsic motivation. So there's actually a positive feedback loop here. When you have any experiences that lead you to feel positively, to have positive emotions and strong intrinsic motivation, that's going to make it more likely that you'll be creative in what you're doing. And if you're teaching kids, putting them in that kind of an environment, leading them to have those kinds of experiences, will enhance their creativity. And when creativity happens, people feel great. They feel like they're making progress. They can see that they've done something nice, something interesting. And that leads to even more positive inner work life, which in turn leads to even more positive experiences with creativity. So for people that you're managing or people that you're teaching, whether they're little kids or high school students or adults, think about how you can support their progress every day in something meaningful, in something that they can enjoy, something they can engage with deeply, something that they feel matters. And for yourself, you can support your own creativity by tracking your progress, finding out what kinds of environments nurture your own intrinsic motivation, your own passions, and try to get more of that in your everyday work and in your everyday life experience.